All right, you guys. So this is some of the craziest stuff that we're going to end up doing. And I've assigned you 6 problems to do of this, and I really want you to give them a try because I want you to understand we mean when we say you can do a half-hour math problem. And so this is the problem right here. We have a triangle, and our question is this a right triangle? So we know, hey, if a squared plus b squared equals c squared, then it is a right triangle. Now, if we look at this, we're going to discover, okay, but what is a? Well, a is x. What about x plus 1? And what about x plus 2? So the question is this a right triangle? In order to do that, what we need to do is we need to take our values for our various sides and plug them in to a, b, and c. This is actually pretty straightforward. We have x squared, we have, we're going to add to that, we're going to add x plus 1 squared, and that's going to equal x plus 2 squared. Now, in order to go ahead and figure out what this is, we actually need to multiply that, and we have to remember, we have to use FOIL, so when we're doing x plus 1 squared, this right here, this is x plus 1 times x plus 1. So we need to actually go ahead and break down what we have. Now, first off, this right here, our x squared is just x squared, so we'll put that one right over here. We've got x squared plus. And then we're going to go through the process to figure this right here out. And so x plus 1 and x plus 1, x plus 1 times x plus 1, we have x squared. We have, so that's our first, our last, first inside, our inside. So we did our inside, our first, our inside, doing this all wrong here. Let me get that cleared out and rewritten a bit. So first, uh, outside. So we did that one. Now we need to do that one, right? So that would be, so x squared plus 1x inside, which would be 1x. So plus 1x. And then our last right here, which would be 1 squared, or 1. So now we can come back down here and say, so what we have to add to this is x squared plus, we have 1, 2x plus 1. And this is going to equal, and now we actually have to do the same thing over here with x plus 2, where we have x plus 2 times x plus 2. So first off, we do our first, right, which is going to be these two right here, this and that, right? So we're going to end up with x squared. Then we're going to do our FO. So we do our first, we do our outside, so this to that, right, which would be 2x. So this is going to be plus 2x. And then we do our inside right here, which is going to be another plus 2x. And then we do our outside, our lasts right here, which is going to be plus 4, or 2 squared, right? So now we can combine this together, and we have x squared plus 4x plus 4. And what we're looking at here is, well, honestly, a pretty big mess. What do we do with this mess? We have an equation, and so what we're going to do is we're going to start simplifying some stuff down. And what we're going to do with this is we're going to go ahead and solve this, and this may sound familiar. We're going to solve it until we can put 0 on this side. So, what do we do? Well, over here we have 2x's and we have an x over 2x squareds and we have an x squared over here. So if I take an x squared and I subtract an x squared here and I subtract an x squared here, those will get canceled out. Over here, I'm going to take away 2x. sorry, 4x. I'm going to take away 4x. I'm going to take away 4x here, leaving me with 2x, negative 2x. Then over here, I'm going to take away 4, which is going to leave me, so minus 4. 1 minus 4 is negative 3. Okay, and I'm going to end up with x squared minus 2x minus 3 equals 0. Now that we've done that, I am going to move on to the next page and rewrite it, because some of you may recognize what we've done here. What did we just do? We just created a quadratic, and guess how we can solve that? We can solve it any number of ways. We can solve it with the quadratic equation, or we can solve it using factoring. And so we can use either of those methods. So we're going to go ahead and start off. And I think I want to factor this because I feel like that may be a little bit easier. And again, remember, in order to factor it, what we're looking for is, because we don't have anything here, we're looking for two numbers that multiply to get negative 3 and that add to get negative 2. So if we're multiplying to get negative 3, there's really only one way to do that, which is we're going to use the numbers 1 and 3. So one of them has to be negative to get negative 3. Turns out if we want to get negative 2 when we add them together, we're going to need the 3 to be negative and the 1 to be positive. Now what we can do with this, these are our two numbers, we can then put them into the format of x plus 1 and x minus 3 equals 0. And now we can go ahead and solve this. And remember, our answers here are basically what can we plug in right here that's going to make this true, and what can we plug in right here that's going to make this true. Well, to plug in to make this right here a 0 to make it true, x would be negative 1. So if we plug in negative 1 plus 1 is 0, that all cancels out and goes away. Over on the other side, we would want to put in 3, because 3 plus 0. So if we put in 1, our result is going to be 0. If we put in 3, or negative 1, if we put in 3, our result is going to be 0. Now we go back to our triangle and we actually look at, well, what's going to make some amount of sense? And I'm going to redraw our triangle right here. So we said this was x plus 1, and this was x plus 2. Well, having a triangle with a side length of negative 1 doesn't make any sense. You can't really do that. So what we end up with is a side length. So this right here is 3. This right here, x plus 1, would be 4. And this right here, x plus 2, would be 5. So we know that 3, 4, and 5, right, x squared, 3, 4, and 5 right here will give us a Pythagorean triple. We know that 3 squared plus 4 squared plus 5 squared is, it does make a right triangle. That's 9 plus 16 is 25. So we go back, and the triangle that we started with right here with x and x plus 1 and x plus 2 must be a right triangle when x is 5. When x is 5, this is a right triangle. If x is not 5, then it's not a right triangle. So in order for this to be a right triangle, x must be 5. Now, if we wanted to, we have another way we could go about solving this, which is we could use the quadratic equation instead. And so I feel it's worth jumping back to that really quick. We have x squared minus 2x plus 3. And in this case, a, which is what's before the x, is 1. We have 1x squared. B is negative 2. And c is, oh, that's supposed to be negative. We'll fix that one. Is negative 3. Then we have negative 2 plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared minus 4a, which is 1, c, which is negative 3. over 2 times 1. And we can just go through and solve this really quickly. We get 2 plus or minus the square root of 4, and this is minus negative 12, which is the same thing as plus 12, divided by 2. We end up with 2 plus or minus the square root of 16 divided by 2. Square root of 16 is 4. So we end up with 2 plus or minus 4 divided by 2. 2 plus 2, or 2 plus 4 is 6. So that's 6 divided by 2, which is 3. And the other side we have is 2 minus 4 divided by 2, which is negative 2 divided by 2, which is negative 1. So we can use either of those methods to go ahead and solve, and we're going to end up with the same answer here and go, okay, hey, here's 3, here's negative 1. Negative 1 doesn't make a lot of sense as a side length, so we'll go ahead and use 3. So give this a try. See how it goes. It may be really difficult. I don't think it's actually that bad, but it is a lot of work, and you have to do it right.